Okay.
Desktop ziehen, das kann ich mal machen. Das ist vielleicht eine gute Idee.
So, a very warm welcome to today's session, A Hitchhiker's Guide to SAP Fiori UX and its Technologies. I will quickly share my screen, and here we go. So, a few words before diving into the presentation of our experts, as well as into the session itself. We will have a lot of time for Q&A. For all of your questions, right in the middle, we will have a coffee and a break for questions, and right at the end as well. And also, the presentation will be uploaded. Just give us maybe a couple of days to upload them, and I will provide the link underneath the description of this video. So, who are our... Here we go. Sorry, here we go again. Here, our experts for today, Oliver Gref. And we have here, sorry, that was too fast. Here we go. And we have Tim Buck, Chief Development Architect in SAP BTP. So I will start with Oliver Graf. He is Product Management for SAP UI5, and he has held various positions in development as well as in project and product management. As you will see probably, or have seen already, he is passionate about engaging with customers and spreading knowledge on SAP technologies. Both experts are really sought after by all our user groups, and they have been present at various user group events. And with this, Oliver, I would like to hand over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Tanya. So I guess you can hear me, you can see my slides. So off we go. So welcome to this webinar, Hitchhiker's Guide to SAP Fiori User Experience and its Technologies. This is important, and this is the flow of this session. So this is a 2-hour webinar. We'll have a first part. We'll have a break. In this break, this 5-minute break, I'm going to look at questions you have put in the YouTube, in the chat, and try to answer your questions in this break. And after 5 minutes, we continue with the second part. And I can recommend to stay tuned, because in the second part, we'll see Tim doing a larger demo of build apps, of build code. And this is really a nice scenario, and I can recommend watching this. And at the end, we're going to have hopefully roughly 15 minutes or maybe even more time for your questions and to answer them. So when planning this webinar, we asked you for the topics which are relevant for you. So we have a nice ranking, a list, and we took that and sorted out our topics according to what you find relevant. So we hope that we hit your expectations as good as possible. Okay, so let's get started. Why is this called a Hitchhiker's Guide? You might be familiar with, if not. I'm just summarizing. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a story by Douglas Adams. Originally, this was a BBC radio comedy series. It was also turned into a book and various other formats. And the story is about Arthur Dent, who is the last surviving man on Earth, because Earth is going to be demolished by aliens for a hyperspace bypass. So Arthur Dent is being rescued in the last minute by Fort Prefect. Fort Prefect is a human-like alien, and he's actually the writer of an electronic travel guide, which is called the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And then it starts, and Arthur Dent and Ford Prefect are exploring the galaxy. And this is a very interesting and very funny story, and I can recommend that. I'm a very proud owner of the first edition of the book you can see here. So this is the 1979 edition. The pages already turned yellow. The first book of this. And on the back cover, it says, I hope you can see that, it says, "Don't panic" here. And that's actually what is written on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So first rule is don't panic. And I thought this is a good motto for this webinar, for embarking on a Fiori journey. There's a lot to learn, but please don't panic. I just want to get to know you a little bit. Can you put in the chat, are you a developer or no developer? Can you put in the chat whether you are a developer or no developer? Don't worry, this webinar fits perfectly even if you're not a developer. Can you just put in the chat whether you are a developer or no developer? I'm watching the chat to see. Might be a little delay. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I see your responses. Just that I get an idea of who you are. Ex-developer, I see. See, we have a good mixture. Very good. So just rest assured the content fits for both. Very nice. Next one. If you are a developer in the SAP context and maybe have developed Fiori apps, just give me a number of how many Fiori apps have you developed. So don't be shy. If you put 0, that's perfectly fine. Just put the number, how many Fiori apps have you developed? I see there's a developer at heart. Very good. Let's see, we have a nice mixture. Let me know how many Fiori apps have you developed. It's perfectly fine if this is 0. The content definitely fits for you. It's especially designed if you're beginners in that area. Excellent. I see a couple of zeros. That is perfect. You are in the right place here. 0.5, so half a Fiori app. This is great. I wonder which half is it. Very good. Excellent. So I think we're good to go. So let's start with the SAP Fiori user experience, because that is the motivation why we're dealing with Fiori design, the tools and technologies. You might know classical applications, transactions at SAP, they're fairly complex. There's lots of functionality in one screen, in one transaction, and many different users use a single transaction. It's very complex, not easy to understand. But if you start designing an application with a person in mind, or at least with a business role in mind, and tailor the functionality for a specific business role, then I think, as this designer here put, amazing things can happen. So SAP is on a journey, partners and customers are on a journey from fairly technical screens, transactions, to an improved user experience, which is, for example, role-based and not so complex as the classical screens. So what's the expectations? Where is this going? I don't have to tell you about how mobile changed the way we live, how mobile changed the way what we expect from software, what we expect from software in our private lives, but also what we expect from software in a business context, for example, from SAP solutions. So there is a certain expectation, and with SAP Fiori user experience, SAP is meeting this expectation. So we started 10 years ago with fairly simple screens. There were web screens, web interface. But as I mentioned before, it's a new design. It's not just a visual design, also the interaction design, the flow through navigation has been redesigned. And the applications are simpler, role-based, very different concept to the classical transactions you might know. And this is an evolution. This is ongoing. You see on the right certain focus topics: consistency, intelligence, integration. And consistency is one of the aspects which I will highlight in this webinar, because it very much is affected by tools and technologies. How can we ensure a consistent user experience within one app, within one solution like SAP S/4HANA, or even across solutions within the SAP portfolio, or even beyond SAP solutions? How can we achieve a consistent user experience by putting capabilities of UI technology, for example, into all those different solutions? And that will be a topic of today, one of the topics. So the first thing, if you look at the user experience, is what you see, the visual design. And the latest theme, the latest visual design of Fiori is the horizon theme. There's a morning horizon version and an evening horizon, which you can see here. It says here for low light environments. I'm not quite sure whether this is a common scenario with business users, but many people like to work with a dark screen because it's somehow easier for the eyes. So that's the visual part of the story. But there's more to consistency. On the left, you see a number of SAP solutions which, for example, are acquired by SAP. They have a very different concept. Visually, from navigation, very different entry screens, as you can see here. And the goal is to have a consistent experience and have one experience for all those solutions, especially if a business scenario goes across several SAP solutions. And you see the SAP Start screen, and we're going to talk about that as one entry point in the Horizon visual theme. You see cards here, and you see tiles to launch applications and to-dos at the top. But the important thing is that we want to offer a consistent experience, maybe based on different technologies, but the experience for the business user should be consistent, and not that you feel a break if you navigate to another solution. And we have that, for example, the Horizon theme in SAP S/4HANA, and you see a couple of screens. And as I mentioned, you might be aware that within SAP S/4HANA, there's different technologies. So some screens have been built with SAP UI5. We're going to talk about that. But there's also some classical UI technologies like SAP GUI or WebDynpro. But also those have received the Horizon theme. So you can see that at least from the visual appearance, they are consistent. They use the same visual design. But not only SAP S/4HANA, but also, for example, SuccessFactors has the Horizon theme. And if the business scenario goes, for example, also in SuccessFactors, you see a consistent experience.
Oliver, let me quickly take this as an opportunity to ask a question. Single entry point on web is SAP Start, and on mobile is mobile Start, right?
That is right, and we'll see a bit more details later, but that is exactly right. We have SAP Start as the start screen for the web and mobile Start for native mobile. But we'll see a bit more later in the session. Exactly. So the Horizon screen also with SAP Concur, and I'm actually doing my expense reports with the Concur mobile app you see here on the right. And I mean, doing expense reports is not the biggest passion of me, but I can tell you it is really fun, and the app is tailored to what I need. There's not tons of functionality in it. I actually like doing my expense report, and it's really easy. So I do really like this design. And we have artificial intelligence, of course, and you might have heard announcements from SAP for dual functionality. So there will be AI functionality, generative AI functionality, as well for the business user to come up with business texts or objects like in various business applications, but also, for example, for developers to generate coding, to generate UI elements, to generate application coding, and so on. So there's much more to come. And also there is Fiori design also for these functionalities. So here we have, at the end of each chapter, I have a couple of links and recommendations. And you see here on the right, this is Marvin. This is a character from the Hitchhiker's Guide book. Marvin is the paranoid android. Marvin is a very intelligent android. He has the brain the size of the planet, it says. So very clever, very smart. But he's not happy because he only gets very simple tasks like making tea or opening doors. So he's depressed and paranoid because he's not getting tasks which match his capabilities. So in these slides here, Marvin is showing a couple of important links or recommendations where I think these are good entry points to learn about the topic of that chapter. For example, here the Fiori design guidelines. So let's have a quick look. This is the link to the Fiori design guidelines. And as you can see here, there's design guidelines for Android, iOS, and for web. And if we launch the web design guidelines, we see lots of material specifying how the design looks like. For example, if we look at the page layouts here, and there's, for example, the flexible column layout, as it says. You see here, that's the layout of an application. You typically have a list of business objects, orders, business partners, customers, products on the left, details of one of the entries here in the middle, and maybe some more details here on the right. So that's a typical layout. And then there's more explanations how this screen layout would work and how you can change it, and with lots of details. Or, for example, if you check the UI5 section here, and there's, for example, here in the action section, there's a button, a UI5 button, and how should a button look like? We want to have consistency across all solutions, so we have to specify the design of a button, the visual design, as you can see here, and for example, different types of button. There's a toggle button, there's a segmented button, there's a menu button, and they all should be consistent so that a business user can use the same functionality, does not have to be surprised or learn a new application, but it's the same functionality in all the different applications. Okay, and there's a designer toolkit also for designing Fiori applications, so not developing, but for designers in Figma tool, for example. You'll find that here in the link. And a general overview of what's new in Fiori, for example, in S/4HANA. There's a blog post here with an update, which gives you just an overview of the latest features from my colleague Thomas Rice, if you're interested. So this is some entry points into the topic of Fiori user experience. Okay, now let's have a look at the technologies and tools. I tried to create here an overview which helps us guides us through this webinar. So what eventually we need to do is a business user would need to run a business application, right? Maybe if you use a standard SAP application, you want to adapt it. You take the standard, but you might want to change it a little bit. Or if this does not work, you might develop your own custom application. So these are tasks we can look at. Who is doing this? Developing is a developer, obviously. The adaptation could be done by a developer, could also be done by a key user. A key user is someone who has a certain technical understanding, but is not a developer, is not working in code. And here's the business user who is running applications. And if we look at the development section, there's low code, no code. You've probably heard that term recently. So someone who is who we call a citizen developer, again, has some technical understanding, is creating applications, but not with pro code tools. We have also tooling for that. And then on the far left is the pro code developer working in code. I guess you'll be will be clear what that is. And on the right, we have for the entry for launching business applications, we have the web desktop, for example, with technologies like SAP UI5 and SAP GUI or Web Pro. We have also mobile technologies for native mobile applications. At the bottom here, I put backend. This is not complete. I just put the most common systems here. There's much more. There's the Business Technology Platform and much more, just to give you an impression that obviously the technologies link to respective backend systems. Now, what do we have? We have the entry screen, and that was one question we just had. So there's various entry screens, and we're going to have a closer look at SAP Start, but also at SAP Work Zone, depending on the functionality you would need. And these are based on Business Technology Platform, because these are central entry points. We're going to have a look at that. Each product has its own entry point or homepage. But if you're looking for a central entry point to various systems, this central place is Business Technology Platform, SAP's cloud platform. What else do we have? For development, we have various tools. We have SAP Build Code with the Business Application Studio, Fiori tools, in case you have heard those terms. We have SAP Build Apps, and these two are part of the demo from Tim. We'll see right after the break. And we have SDKs for native mobile development, and we're going to talk about them as well. What else? We have also local development environments. So some developers prefer to work locally, for example, in Visual Studio Code, if it's about non-ABAP development, or if it's about ABAP development, then the ABAP development tools, ADT in Eclipse, are the way to go. So ABAP development happens in Eclipse, in the ABAP development tools, and all other developments happen in SAP Build Code and Business Application Studio, or locally in Visual Studio Code. Okay, that was development. Now the adapt task, changing, extending, adapting, customizing, depending on what term you want to use, a standard application for your use case. And there we see SAP UI5 flexibility if the application is an SAP UI5 application or screen personas. And we're covering that also in the second part of today's webinar. And we have SAP Mobile Start as the start, central start entry page, native entry page for mobile devices. So this is the content. The colored boxes here in the middle are chapters of the webinar, and we're going to start and look at the first ones, the entry points. SAP Work Zone. So the idea of SAP Work Zone is to increase productivity of the business user by providing applications. It's the launch pad. You might have heard the Fiori Launchpad term for launching applications, for providing access to processes or to even other information, unstructured information. So that's the idea. So there's entry points on different levels. if we start from bottom to top here in this screen, there's detailed apps. At the bottom level here is an individual app for example, for managing products, right? The next level to enter this app could be an overview page. This is a page giving some analytics, giving some information about a certain application area from where you navigate to individual apps, the 3 apps we have here at the bottom. So this is an overview page here for a certain area of applications. And then the next level higher is home pages of individual products. So there's a homepage of SAP S/4HANA Cloud, of SuccessFactors and other solutions. These are can standalone operate, obviously. Each system has an own homepage where you can launch the applications and overview pages, right? Every system can exist and can be used on its own. That's it. The interesting part is if you want to have a central entry point. This is which comes on top. The central place is obviously the Business Technology Platform, where various systems, as you can see here, are linked. And then you have entry points, the SAP Start or Build Work Zone, as an entry point to many systems. And we're going to have a look now at this aspect here. And there's a modular offering. We have the SAP Start is the like the default solution. It's a pre-configured homepage for cloud solutions, right? So there's no configuration needed. You can right away use this. This is available on SAP BTP, Business Technology Platform, and can connect cloud solutions, pre-configured out of the box content to launch applications in cloud solutions. Next level of functionality, more functionality, is SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition. This is, if you have been familiar with the Fiori Launchpad term, this is the Launchpad service on BTP, or in on-prem terms, the Fiori Launchpad. So launching individual applications have tiles to launch applications. And this is the central entry point to cloud and on-prem, customizable, role-based entry point to your different areas of applications. And third level is Build Work Zone Advanced Edition. This comes on top with capabilities for collaboration, for example, for having unstructured data. This is more into the direction of a portal functionality, right? Not just structured launching applications. And all of these are covered by the Horizon theme. And we're going to mention Mobile Start as well, which is the mobile version of the SAP Start. And just to give a bit more background about the differences, on the left, you see the product homepage for the specific product. There's SAP Start, connecting cloud systems. There's Build Work Zone Standard Edition, which can connect cloud and on-prem system and offers capabilities to configure that. And there's Build Work Zone Advanced Edition with the same capabilities, but on top, capable of dealing with unstructured data, with collaboration, with interactive workspaces, and so on. So this is the offering for an entry point to SAP Business Applications. Not sure, should we, maybe, Tanya, should we stop for a second and check whether there are any questions?
Actually, yes. Maybe one very quickly. Is SAP Start already available to use, or is it in beta?
It is. I'm not exactly sure. It is went recently GA, just a few weeks ago. Yes, it's available.
Perfect. And then the other one is, can you give an example of how SAP Start can be an entry point for S/4HANA on-premise application?
The SAP Start. Okay, let me just share again so I can show that. So the SAP Start here is for cloud applications, right? So if you want to integrate on-prem systems, then the Build Work Zone Standard Edition is the right place. SAP Start is for cloud solutions. Okay, so let me continue. Just a couple of links here.
May I quickly ask another question? Is SAP Build Work Zone itself only in the cloud or also on-premise?
The Build Work Zone is a service on BTP. So the Build Work Zone, Standard Edition, Advanced Edition, just like SAP Start, is running on BTP in cloud. But Build Work Zone can connect also on-prem system, as you can see here with these pictograms here. But all of them are central entry points, and central is on cloud because that is the central point because you're connecting different systems. Okay, so this is the like entry points to information, more information on this. And there's also tutorials here. And I just want to show you one tutorial here. This one is on Build Work Zone Standard Edition. Just to give you an impression. So this is a hands-on step-by-step tutorial in the trial environment of BTP to try out a Build Work Zone Standard Edition. So if you open the steps here, you will be guided to creating your trial account on BTP, to create a site screen in Work Zone Standard Edition, and then configure that. For example, integrate an SAP UI5 app into that page, or integrate some URL leading to some other applications, or designing the site there's different ways to structure the site, spaces and pages, and so on. And you see here detailed step-by-step guidance once you launch this individual steps here. So this is a good tutorial to actually feel and click through that and understand what this is about. Okay, let's go to the next topic, the UI technology of SAP Fiori. SAP UI5 is a cross-platform technology for enterprise-grade applications. So cross-platform, it's available in all the solutions, so we can provide a consistent experience, and it provides enterprise-grade applications, features. For example, accessibility, for example, security. You can translate that, you can localize that. All the qualities you would expect from SAP, part of SAP UI5. There's hundreds of enterprise UI elements, not just simple ones like input field, buttons and checkboxes, but also complex ones like tables and hierarchies, what you would need in certain business applications at SAP. And there's powerful extension options, and we're going to talk about that also in the second half of the webinar, ways to extend standard applications, which is obviously very common. And SAP applications are web applications, so they run in the browser. And SAP UI5 takes care of various browsers, takes care of various devices. This would run on desktop, but also on tablets or phone sizes, and automatically in a responsive way adapt to the size of the device. And it runs in various operating systems. So with SAP UI5, you can develop your business application once, and it would run in all those browsers, devices, platforms, and so on. So that is a scenario that business users have different devices, then a web application would be the right approach versus native mobile. There's also another approach we introduced because we want to bring UI5 qualities not only to those solutions where we have SAP UI5, for example, S/4HANA, for example, ECC, for example, BTP, but also to other solutions to provide the consistent experience. And how can we bring UI5 qualities to other technology stacks where we have no SAP UI5? And this is where we use UI5 Web Components. Web Components is a standard based on HTML. If we look at HTML, you see plain HTML here in this box. No SAP, no ABAP, no NetWeaver, no cloud, no SAP, nothing. This is pure HTML, and the result is a pure HTML screen. There's no Fiori, no Horizon theme, no security, no accessibility. This is pure HTML. But we want to bring in Fiori qualities into this. So we're using the Web Component standard by introducing UI5 Web Components. You see the HTML text here with the UI5 dash included. And the result of this is more looking like Fiori because it uses the Horizon theme. It is accessible via the keyboard. You can translate that. It is secure and so on and so on. It has the Fiori qualities. But the interesting part is this is still purely an HTML page. No SAP UI5, no programming model. You can use this on top of other UI technologies. So if a solution is implemented with React or Angular or other technologies, UI5 Web Components help to keep that, and on top, use the UI5 Web Components to introduce Fiori qualities, even though there's completely different technology stacks, even non-SAP technology stacks underneath. All of this to provide a consistent user experience. And if we zoom out a little bit, we have different offerings. At the bottom, you see the visual design, you see individual UI elements, and on the top, bigger parts, full page patterns. And we have offerings for each of these. The standard case, if you're, for example, in ECC or going to S/4HANA, is SAP UI5 and Fiori Elements. And I'm going to explain that in a second. But there's also other offerings for other technologies based on UI5 Web Components. This picture shows you that we have central reuse technologies, the CSS for theming, the web components for bringing the UI qualities into different stacks. So same qualities in different technologies, in different solutions to provide a consistent experience across many SAP solutions. Just showing off a couple of numbers how SAP UI5 and UI5 Web Components are used. It's a large number of applications in SAP. It's a growing number of applications because applications need to provide a consistent Fiori user experience. There's a huge number of applications and business users using UI5 and a thriving developer ecosystem with partners in the open source community and so on. So we're very proud that this is a growing community here of SAP UI5 developers. And a couple of links here. You see the UI5 demo kit. This is ui5.sap.com. And there is also tutorials, demo apps here. There's the UI5 community where developers can exchange. So I recommend these links to get started and learn about SAP UI5. Next topic is Fiori Elements. So imagine you develop applications with SAP UI5. You're creating code and you're owning code. Maybe a developer at SAP and S/4HANA, maybe a partner developer, maybe as a customer, you create your custom app. So you're developing your SAP UI5 application and maybe a second one and maybe a third one. You might copy some coding and in the end, you would own quite some coding, SAP UI5 coding, for example. And you own that coding and you need to debug and maintain that coding and you would need to change that coding. And this is quite some effort. So we were thinking, is there a way to make this more efficient, to develop SAP UI5 apps in a more efficient way, so that some common parts are in a central reuse layer, which is at SAP. So as an application developer, you don't need to care. You can just reuse it and focus on developing the business logic. And this is Fiori Elements. The idea is that we provide consistency, again, consistency, by reusing something. If you reuse it, it's the same, right? Does not exist several times. And that means it decreases training times because all the applications look the same, because all the applications behave the same. The quality is higher because it's implemented only once in SAP and everyone uses it. So if there's a bug, it will be fixed very quickly because it's centrally reused. So this is the idea. But what do we want to reuse? There's many things. Imagine a floor plan, a pattern, like a list report here, a list of, in this case, it's documents, and there's a detail screen. But there's many aspects to it. There's the visual design, there's search fields, there's different filters here, there's action buttons, there's sorting, there's personalization of table columns, there's export to Excel, there's navigation, there's editing, draft management, creating new, and so on and so on. And all the enterprise qualities you see here listed on the right. So all these things you would not want to develop again and again and again for each application. You want SAP to handle this and focus on your business logic. And the applications would all look similar, would all look like this, because this is what the Fiori design recommends. And how can we do that? In the end, we want to have an SAP UI5 view. You see that at the bottom here. This is what we need to have at the end. And instead of developing this with your UI5 coding, line after line, owning a lot of coding, instead of that, we're generating this. What do we need? We need at the top the business data, because, for example, a table would need to show some data. We also have the Fiori Elements patterns, for example, a list report and object page pattern. And this is provided by SAP, what I just showed you in the slide before. So all the functionality is provided by SAP. But then still something is missing, because as an application developer, you would still need to add something. Which data should show up where? Does the list report object page show products or orders or business partners? Does the object, can it be edited or is it read-only? Can you create a new entity? And so on. And this is the information, semantic metadata here, provided by annotation by the application developer. And then at runtime, these are combined and the UI5 app is generated. So the UI5 app is not explicitly written, manually written, but generated at runtime. And that looks like an either-or decision, right? Either you're following the Fiori Elements approach, list report object page, for example, the full page patterns on the left, or you're using the Freestyle UI5 approach, which is your own coding. This means you're very flexible. It's your coding. You can do any design, any requirement. But the Fiori Elements approach is more efficient because you own less coding. You can very quickly come up with an application like the list report and object page. And Tim will show right after the break, will show how fast that can happen. But there's also some in between. You can also use what we call the flexible programming model. With that, you can use a mixture of both. You can use Fiori Elements, metadata-driven reuse blocks, but also Freestyle UI5 coding. And this is again showing the differences. So what, for example, the development knowledge, what is needed? For Freestyle UI5 on the right, you would need web development skills. You would need to know about UI5, about JavaScript, HTML. Whereas if you use the Fiori Elements approach, you would need to know about the metadata to control the UI, about the annotations. And you see the differences here of the two approaches. And at the bottom here, it says, what we recommend at SAP is that you use as much Fiori Elements approach as possible, because you have a lot of things for free, and as much Freestyle UI5 as needed. If you have a requirement to be very flexible, to add your own coding, you can add that. So use Fiori Elements as much as possible, Freestyle UI5 as much as needed. And let me skip that. And yeah, here again is a couple of links. And for example, again, a tutorial. Let me quickly show you a tutorial to learn about Fiori Elements development. It's a hands-on, again, step-by-step tutorial. You see the different chapters here. First one is setting up the tools and then generating a new project, a Fiori app, based on the Fiori Elements template. And then you configure the screens. And this says, it doesn't say develop the screens, but configure. This is the metadata, the annotations, not doing code, JavaScript code, but configuring the list report and configuring the object page. So this is a good tutorial if you want to learn how Fiori Elements works, a good entry point into that. Very good. So I think we are or almost not half of the 2 hours in the middle, but what we want to do now is to have 5 minutes break of coffee, and I'm going to check the questions you have and see together with Tanya whether I can answer a couple of questions. Tanya, you might need to help.
Let me go back. So we had if we're doing Work Zone part. Can Work Zone Standard Edition work or show Ariba tiles?
In the Work Zone, you can include different types of applications, whether it's an SAP UI5 application, whether it's classic UI technologies, or just an URL pointing to some application with some technology. You would have less features of integration, but it's possible to integrate any kind of application.
Okay, then we have SAP Mobile Start can capture all three. That is SAP Start, Work Zone Standard, Work Zone Advanced, right?
It's different functionality. The capabilities of Work Zone, Standard or Advanced, they have dedicated capabilities for building the business sites, for collaboration, and so on. And Mobile Start, running on a mobile device, has different capabilities. And I'm trying to show Mobile Start at the end if we have time. But it's a different entry point. It plays it's the same scenario, but different capabilities because this is happening on a native small mobile device.
Thank you. And then, so for the workspace to replace the Fiori Launchpad, the customer needs BTP, right?
There's also Fiori Launchpad in on-premise systems. So that is possible as well. And as I mentioned, there's home pages in every SAP solutions, individual home pages. But if the scenario is to have a central homepage where you connect different systems, cloud or on-prem, then the Work Zone is the right product. And this is where those systems can come together. And this coming together is an additional functionality of Work Zone running on BTP.
Great. Well, I hope that answers your question. Then the next one, just for clarity's sake, SAP UI5 is not applicable for native mobile apps development, right?
Not recommended, I would say. So as SAP UI5 runs in the browser and you have a browser on your mobile device, it would run there as well. And as it's a responsive technology, it would automatically adapt to the smaller screen size, and you can very well use the app also on a mobile device. But typically, if it's a mobile use case, the expectations are that this is for offline, for example, or for super fast response times and so on. And this is where we would rather recommend native mobile technologies, the SDKs for iOS and Android. I'm going to mention that a bit later, or MDK, so the native mobile technologies.
Thank you. A SAP UI5 application is not actually coded by the developer. Is it generated by the system using SAP UI5 Components and business logic?
There's two approaches. One approach is the metadata-driven approach, what we call Fiori elements. And this is where the UI5 coding is generated based on metadata, based on the templates by SAP, and based on metadata provided by the application developer. For example, you, if you are a customer, a developer at a customer. But there's also the other approach to go freestyle SAP UI5. This is less efficient, but you're much more flexible because with your own UI5 coding, you develop with knowledge of web development, of JavaScript, for example. You're very flexible to implement any design requirements, for example, but it's also more effort. So we recommend the Fiori elements approach as much as possible and only go for freestyle UI5 if needed. But again, also the Fiori elements is based on UI5. All of this is UI5 being the strategic web technology of SAP.
Great, thank you. Then, so far, one last question. Is it possible to try out standard UI5 application and add it in Work Zone in SAP BTP trial account?
That is possible. Adding a UI5 application in Work Zone is exactly the tutorial I just showed you a minute ago. And a bit later in this webinar, we are also covering the extensibility topic on how to adapt a standard app, and I'm going to explain that as well.
Then, do you use Fiori elements in Build Apps UI5?
We're not using Fiori elements. We're not using SAP UI5 in Build Apps. And I suggest we'll move that a bit because we're going to see a demo and cover Build Apps in just 1 minute, I think.
So another question, do we still have time? So the metadata approach, Fiori elements, covers then again different approaches. RESTful application model falls also in this approach, is it not?
I would say this is different layers, different levels. The Fiori elements approach or freestyle UI5 or the flexible programming model, which is a mixture of both. This is on UI level. And it's controlled by metadata, by the annotations. Now, where do the annotations come from? That's the next level further down. The annotations could come from a cloud application, from an ABAP application, and then the applications are provided by that application or the respective programming model.
Great.
Okay, so
forward,
we'll definitely have time for more questions at the end. And for me, we could also go over time to just answer your questions. So we'll have more time for that. And I would suggest that we move to Tim, right?
Yes. I hope you can see me and also see the slide.
Yeah.
So I would go to the next topic. And so we'd start now with the tools. This would also be a question to you. We have a lot of tools available at SAP in ABAP already SE80, then newer Eclipse or the ABAP development tools. We then still have the SAP Web IDE, which is followed up by the SAP Business Application Studio. This is going to be one of the demos that you will see in the Business Application Studio. We support VS Code. And of course, we also have SAP Build Apps to build applications. With all of these, you can build applications. And if you like, you can mention in the chat, also a help for us, which of the tools that you've already used or you are currently using. Next up, it's also, there's always like this tension whether someone wants to have more guidance on the left-hand side. So wizard, templates, low-code, no-code tools, not having to go down really into code, but maybe being less flexible, or on the right-hand side, whether one wants to be more flexible, sorry about that, and then be on the command line, be really in the code, but not have so much guidance. That would also be interesting to know from you which way you are more inclined to go, or what would you like more from us? With that, let's go to the next slide. So Oliver has shown this already. Where we are now is basically this blue part. So you will learn about our new product Build Code, where the tools, the Business Application Studio and also the Fiori tools, for example, are part in, but there's much more than these tools. It's a whole development environment. So this is Build Code I will be talking about. And then on the right-hand side, there's also Build Apps, so part of the Build family. Build Apps is the application part of Build. There's also processes and there's Work Zone, as Oliver already said. Oliver also mentioned mobile. So we have the mobile development kit on the lower right-hand side, which is one solution where you can build mobile applications, but kind of in a player. They will immediately come up in the player on Android and iOS without you having to do some specialized stuff for these two environments. But then Oliver also mentioned the SDKs for iOS and Android. So this gives you a even more native user experience that might be, as you all know, different in iOS to Android, and you can actually specialize much more for these ones. But it's also a bit harder to do that. So with this, let's now look into pro code, low code, and no code in the development environments, and that we have a kind of bigger, maybe a bit busy picture. All of this is part of the Business Technology Platform. So we are basically looking, these tools run in the Business Technology Platform. It doesn't always mean that also the result has to run in the Business Technology Platform, but often, right? Not always. So as mentioned before, we have Build Apps, which is more or less low code or no code development. It's for our citizen developers. And you can see a line of business experts, business analysts. These are the citizen developers. Then we have the pro code environments with the Business Application Studio, also VS Code. And that is new in the so-called Build Code environment. And we'll talk about Build Code in a second. There are loads of services that help you with your development and with the applications. For example, document services to create attachments, but also mobile services that we mentioned before. Then application frameworks, UI technologies. This is mainly today about user experience. UI5 Fiori Elements was already mentioned in detail by Oliver. But then there is also the backend models. One for ABAP. Basically, there is RAP, but also the whole programming model is called ABAP Cloud, really. RAP is just one part of this ABAP Cloud programming model. And then there is the equivalent CAP, or the Cloud Application Programming Model. So that's the non-ABAP part, for a lack of a better and more suitable word. We have runtimes. On the ABAP part, it would be the ABAP environment. Don't be misled. This can't be read in a stacked way. So CAP is not running on ABAP. Likewise, the RAP, or the ABAP Cloud model, is not running on Kyma or Cloud Foundry, so the other two runtimes that we have, but RAP is on the ABAP environment on the BTP. CAP would run on Kyma or the Cloud Foundry runtime. That's just as a big picture. You would say even a bigger picture is, again, this one, you have Build as the low-code part on the left-hand side, and you have the new kid on the block, the Build Code part, which is the pro code one. I think it's fair to say that also, and you will see that in the demo, that also Build Code includes some low-code parts meanwhile. But it's mainly for pro coders as much as the ABAP environment is on the BTP. You have a choice, as said before, to do either ABAP or non-ABAP. So the non-ABAP part is SAP Build Code. Let's have a first look now into Build Apps, and I'll get into a demo for that in a second. So Build Apps is our environment, as mentioned, for citizen developers. You can do a lot of drag and drop there. You don't really need to code at all. It's just, configuration, you could say, and drag and drop with visual tools. You can either, as you can see down here, you can either even generate some logic without coding and really easily integrate data. But it's always better to see that live, and let's start that. I'm in the lobby, in the so-called lobby, and I will have that in the second part of the demo as well. For the first part, we are a citizen developer. As mentioned, we get into the lobby and we can create and see our project that we've created. So you can see already there are some from Build Apps and some from Build Code. We will now create one from Build Apps. So you ask what you want to do. We want to create an application, not a process and not a site. That would be process automation. That's Work Zone. We want to build an application. And then you ask whether you want to do that in the citizen developer. So the Build Apps way or Build Code for the pro developers. We go now for the citizen developer. We want to do everything visual. And we want to create a web and mobile application. And let's call it risk management. That's the theme that we want to do. We want to create a risk management application. And we are jumping into the tool. So this is Build Apps now that's coming up, and we already see a first screen. There is something on there that we are going to change. But what we want to do really is we want to use a service that has some data already for us. And that service would already be running on the BTP. It could also be S4, but to connect to this service, we need to first go to auth. We need to create some authentication. We will enable authentication. And what we want to do is we want to go to the BTP and get some authentication from the BTP. So once we've done that, we can go to the next one. We can go to data and basically say what kind of systems we want to integrate. In this case, there is no system yet integrated. We can add an integration. One is Build Apps' very own Visual Cloud Functions, which is also a possibility to create backend logic. We are going for subsystems here. And in the BTP, you have the so-called destinations, and the so-called destinations give you a choice of which APIs you want to use. Someone has told me already that there is a risk management service, and that's the one that I want to choose. I can look at that and I can see, well, there's two entities, risks and mitigations. I see a couple of fields here. I can say, okay, for risks, let me actually look at the data, and I can see, okay, there are actually some risks already maintained. So the service is running, and that looks good to me. And I want to integrate this into my solution. And from the two entities, I say I want to enable the risks where we are. I could also choose mitigations, but for now, risks is fine, because at the end, the application that I want to create is a list of risks, and that I want to do that in a fast way. So next thing, I go back to the UI canvas. First of all, there's a headline, and we see there is some text there. We want this to be risks, right? We want to show risks here. And then there's some other text, and we don't really need that text, so we get rid of it. Then you see on the left-hand side, you see a menu with controls that you can use. And we want to create a list really of risks. So I'm taking list items here, and this comes up. So I drag and drop this over. And now I want to add some data. So the data should actually come from my service that I've just created or that I just integrated. To get there, first, I need to actually add that as a so-called data variable. I'm doing that. When I say add data variable, it asks me, well, which entity that I've integrated. I've only integrated risks. I want to take over. Risks is fine. And so this is now available for me in my UI, right? So the service is more or less connected to my UI. And now I want to say, okay, this list here really should make use of the risks. And because it's a list, I'm saying repeat the list or repeat the items in the list with data and variables. We just created a data variable and the variable is risk. So I'm taking this. So once this happened, you will see there is a number of entries already now, just in a schematic way to show that this will be a list. Now I can say what's in the list, what should be in the list. So instead of having this primary first label, so maybe going back to where it says lorem ipsum, I can say, I want one of the data items which are in repeat, which are repeated. And this is actually the data from our risk service, right, that we integrated. So I'm taking the description first. Maybe to make that clearer, I also changed the preview value, so I don't have to do that, but maybe it's more readable. Next thing, I want to change this label here, the secondary label. I can go here again, say data item in repeat, and let's say now the impact is important. That's how, you know, how much money would be the impact of this risk. And actually that concludes already the application creation part. I saved this all and I can now test it. I can test it either by actually building the app and then actually even put it on a mobile phone directly, or building a mobile application, or I can just preview that. I can preview it again on my device. That would be a bit harder to show for me, but I can also preview in the web. I see my application here. It's the risk management build that we've just created, and we see the results. So we see all the entries that we've seen in the service before and all the impact that was in there. And that's how easy it is. In a couple of minutes, we created our first application with SAP Build. Now let's go back to the slides. Now let's go to Build Code. So Build Code, as mentioned, is the Pro Code part. The people who are familiar with the BTP will know a lot of stuff that is in Build Code. You can think of Build Code as you know, almost a package where a number of technologies, like the Cloud Application Programming Model, CAP, like the UI technologies that Oliver mentioned, like all the mobile stuff that we talked about, document management, all these services and technologies are already integrated in a package. And that package more or less is, there is a new experience from this. Well, first of all, there's a new commercial model. So all these services will be metered in one with one way, not everything slightly different. Users there, storage there, it's metered in the same way. It will be provisioned automatically. You don't have to provision as an admin each and every service. And then at the end of the day, also very important, in the Business Application Studio, the whole, you know, programming of an application using these technologies and services is streamlined and made much more easily. So while it's still possible to be at BTP to do kind of pick each service, each technology as you want, right? You're still free to do that. Build Code is a package for you where it's really easy to get it, to provision it, and then develop on it. And it basically gives you much more guidance on how to do things. So in Build Code, we will see there's the Business Application Studio use. The Business Application Studio comes with so-called dev spaces. The first two, which are highlighted in red, are actually like, you'll see that also in a demo, are the default ones in Build Code. So you can do either, first of all, a UI application, right? That would be just a new UI experience, either with Fiori Elements, MDK, or UI5. Or in this case, it's UI5 and Fiori Elements, not MDK. And there is full stack applications. So full stack applications with productivity toolkit, as it says, full stack applications, that would be CAP, and that would be Fiori Elements, and that would be mobile development kit. So the back end and the front end, and or a mobile application you can create with it. And the productivity toolkit means you don't even have to code to get to a certain point. You only have to, you only use visual coding and generative AI. And that's going to be a huge part of what I'm going to show in a minute. There are other dev spaces that you can create for other purposes. These are not default in Build Code, but you can, at this point at least, but you can create them, for example, just for mobile development or just for developing HANA applications. Last but not least, before we get into the next demo, Fiori tools. They are part of the Business Application Studio, but as it says also on the right-hand side up there, they're also in Visual Code. You can basically, with these, generate projects, Freestyle UI5 ones or Fiori Elements ones. You can then edit the pages. It's different, of course, like if you do Freestyle UI5 or Fiori Elements. For Fiori Elements, they have a so-called page map, which you will see in action in a minute in the demo as well. There is a lot of other tools in the Fiori tools, like step-by-step instructions where you get some sample code or some code suggested that you can take over, code snippets. There's code completion. And there's, of course, also a preview of the whole application. Let's see all of this in action. And I think, you know, something that a lot of people are interested in is also generative AI. We are going back to the lobby where we were before. Now, actually, I would do the same process almost. I will build an application. This time, I will not go to build apps, but to build code. And as mentioned before, there are two different dev spaces, one for UI applications and one for, well, backend and UI applications. We go for the full stack application. I would type in something like risk management again, and I would create that here because that takes half a minute or so and we can spare that time. I've already done that. And at the end of the process, one would jump into the Business Application Studio and would see a canvas like this. This is a so-called storyboard, and you can already see what you can do here. You can create data models and services, so that would be the CAP part, and you can create UI applications. But you can also bind in external resources and see if we have time whether we get to this. So at this moment, there's nothing really in there. It's just more or less an empty project. But what we can do now, we could start manually adding data models and services, and that's already great. But what we can also do is we can actually apply some generative AI, and that's also part of Build Code, and it's new. So I would go to a guide which says generative AI powered development. And in there, we can go for data model and service creation. And what we do here is we open Joule. So Joule is the digital assistant, our generative or AI assistant. And we can now come up with a text and ask Joule to do something. I have already gotten this text. And I'm telling Joule to do something here, really. And what do we ask it? We say, we want to have a risk management application with risks and mitigations. Each risk should refer to a mitigation. We want to have some realistic properties for each entity. And two of them should be criticality and impact. So impact and criticality. So we're basically creating a service very similar to the one that we've just used in Build Apps. Also, we say impact should be in the range of $1,000 to $20,000. And while I was actually reading this out to you, which is obviously something that's really, you know, nice to understand, it's natural language. Joule was actually coming up with a suggestion. This is CDS, so this is the basis of both CAP and RAP. In this case, it's only for CAP. In RAP, it's slightly different, but the same kind of thing. CDS is our language to describe entities and services here. So it came up with risks, and even if you don't know CDS, I think it's easy to read. It has properties. We can see actually it has impact and criticality as we asked for, and it has also an association for those who know what that is to mitigations. And we said there should be a referral, right? And I've looked at this as a developer and took it over, and I can now close Joule. I actually now, with just this, have a full-blown OData service already. I could start it. But it's almost too easy at this point. We haven't programmed anything. We still will not program anything, but we now want to have a bit more complicated stuff. We want to say, okay, this is an OData service. It can read, it can create something, but we want to have some application logic. So I'm jumping into the so-called graphical modeler. So the graphical modeler is the place where you can actually manually add and change properties without programming. But it's also the place where you can add logic. Let's go to this and let's add some application logic. So that's CAP logic. And so what we are saying is that after there has been a read for our risks, maybe this is from the UI. So the UI wants to show a list, and then for that, it reads all the data. And after this read has happened, we want to do something. So we want to add some logic after that. And you see what then comes up. Normally, as a developer, you would now create some JavaScript code. But you see, again, Joule already looms on the left-hand side. And this is, I'll take this over here, because we want to add the logic in natural language. We say our impact field, if that is greater than $10,000, and then the criticality field is set to 1, otherwise to 2. Now, this is quite an easy logic. It can be much more complicated. But you will see already with this easy logic, it does a lot of things for you, which you first would have to think of. And it's very important, the code that's generated, if it's more complicated than that, is always kind of a jump start for you. As a developer, you have to check whether that's fine, whether it actually works. Sometimes things come up. You've used ChatGPT, I'm sure, that are harder to, or where it doesn't immediately work. Sometimes it really works well, but it might not be optimal. In this case, it's almost perfect. It actually finds, oh, there could be more than one risk right? It could be an array of risks, or it could be one, and it actually already takes care of Java for you in the JavaScript code. But okay, we checked this, still haven't programmed anything, but now we also have some logic. And now we get to the next part, which is the UI part, and we get to the Fiori tools, or also MDK. We now want to create a new application, a UI application. We want to call it risks. We have a choice of Fiori elements on the left-hand side and MDK on the right-hand side. The differentiation here is, Oliver talked a bit about the different UI technologies already. On the left, there are many more things to consider here, but one decisive factor is Fiori elements at this point is rather for the desktop. You can see this, you can have huge tables there, maybe with 20 columns. It also works on a mobile phone, it's responsive, but you can imagine even like a responsive broken down 20-column table is, on a mobile phone. It does work, but there are nicer experiences. On the other hand, the MDK, it's the other way around. You start with mobile first, and it also works on a desktop, but it's one of these things. Usually you have that from a mobile, and a desktop, it looks still like mobile because everything is a bit bigger, and there so it's basically they both work on all the devices, but it really depends on where most of your focus is. If it's desktop, you should rather go to Fiori Elements. MDK, you should rather go to if you want to have a mobile experience. Okay, so I've chosen Fiori Elements, and we are choosing the list report with an object page. It then asks me which entity. It could be risks or mitigations. We go for the risks. And now it takes, again, some 20 seconds or so. Because for those who are in the know, Fiori Elements does an npm install in the back. So a couple of things have to be installed, and we have to wait for that. You see it already comes up here, the Fiori Elements application, but after this waiting time, it will open something called the page map. The page map will show us 2 screens. One is the list and one is the object page. And we will then, here we are. Now we see the 2 screens, list report and the object page. And let's have a look into the list first. And we can see there are already a couple of columns generated. Usually 5. I think we don't have even more than 5 in this case. But there is also impact and criticality. And let's say criticality, this is actually not a field that we want to have on the UI. We don't want to see a 1 or a 2. So I'm deleting this. Instead, we want to use that for something else. We want to have a visual indication of the criticality, and we want to have that at the impact. So I'm going to the impact, and I see for impact, there's already a lot of stuff that you can actually change. These are all in the back, are all annotations. And there is something, funnily enough, there's a criticality here. So we can actually set up a criticality, and we can bind that to the criticality of our service. So whether it's 1 or 2. And we can actually say the criticality, to add some more drama, should have an icon. So we did some manual changes. We still haven't coded anything, but we can now actually start our UI. There's a preview in there, so I don't need to deploy to test to the BTP. I can later on deploy with just 1 click. It's really a 1-click deployment. For those who are in the know, we create the MTA. But to test this all, I don't have to do this. CAP and Fiori Elements run directly locally, you could say, or locally in the Business Application Studio, which of course is in the cloud. But you see here, we could inspect our service, but in the interest of time, we don't do that. We go directly to the risk application. Here we see a Fiori Elements application. If we press go, well, we already see some data. So the generative AI, something that we haven't really looked into. It did not only create the data model and the service, but it also created some sample data. And you might remember at the beginning, we said the impact should be between $1 and $20,000. And then we set up our application logic, which said when it's more than $10,000, the criticality should be 1. And you can see that here. So it's indicated in red. And if not, criticality is 2. It looks like that. One last thing that I want to show is also when you go here, you also get a nice value help already for mitigations. Already the mitigations have values in here. So all this is generated. And now we are at the end of my demo. And Oliver, you can slightly already take over. I just want to mention as a last thing, again, this is, if you think about that in a couple of minutes, really, we've created a full-blown application. And without me talking about it, it would have been even faster, and we haven't programmed a single thing. Maybe, Oliver, one last thing that I want to mention, the really also important part is, while you don't have to program to get that far, I'll also stop the preview. Behind the scenes, there is a normal project created, and that's a great thing. There is no additional metadata. Everything that's done here, for example, the CDS for the service or the CDS for the model, is just normal code that could have been written in the same way by an application developer that wouldn't see any or wouldn't let any visual tool near them. Right? So you can at any time decide to switch all of this stuff off and then just go into the code and continue from there with code, with cloud application programming model, with UI5, Fiori Elements, and all the stuff that's in there, and never look into the visual tools again. Yeah, that's important. And with that, Oliver, you could take over.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. I just want to, if you have time for one question, Tim, there's one. I mean, we have time for questions at the end, no problem. I just want to mention one thing, because I think that is important. There's sometimes a little confusion. What is Business Application Studio and what is Build Code? Can you maybe just quickly highlight the difference?
Build Code is the whole package, right? Maybe if you go quickly, Oliver, if you go 1 or 2 slides back where all the Build Code, this one, the one where all this one. You see the Business Application Studio. I didn't mention this at the very top, right? So the Business Application Studio is the tool the standard tool with which you program all the technologies and you use all the services that are below. So cloud application programming model, UI5, and so on. You do that via the Business Application Studio. All of what is in this whole blue thing is part of Build Code. So the Business Application Studio as the tool, but also the technologies and the services that you see underneath. So Business Application Studio is a part of Build Code.
Exactly. Thanks, Tim. I think this was a great demo. I'm impressed over and over again. I just want to repeat what Tim explained at the end, because I think this is so important. So just again, thank you, Tim, for the explanations and demo. I just want to repeat one thing. What you've seen Tim doing in SAP Build Code, it used a lot of visual tools, right? But behind the scenes, the real coding is being created, not any metadata secret code, but it's the real CDS code, the real UI5 code, Fiori elements, and so on. So once you think the visual tools would not be sufficient anymore, and you would need to go to coding to be more flexible, then you can always open the folders and files and work on the coding and also see the result in the visual editors. So I think this is a big advantage, and I'm just repeating this because I find this so important. Excellent. So we're going to see, have more time for questions at the end. I see a couple of questions in the chat, but let me first finish and then go to the questions. So end of this chapter, there's a couple of links, this time a bit more. Marvin is showing here. There's a tutorial on Build Apps to try this out on the BTP trial account. You see here at the top. And I added a couple of tutorials for Business Application Studio or Build Code. For example, the productivity tools you see in this area, number 4 and 5. There's a hands-on tutorial and a learning journey to learn about specifically the productivity tools, which is most of what Tim showed in his demo, but also the other tutorials here. And again, there's much more tutorials at the bottom. I linked the Developers Discovery Center for missions and the developer tutorials if you want to search for more tutorials with other focus. So where are we? We want to cover mobile. There was a question about mobile. So also for native mobile applications, we do have the design guidelines, which is, well, to simplify this a bit, sort of mixture of the native Android or iOS design guidelines and the Fiori guidelines. We have the respective design stencils for designers to come up with designs. And we have the Fiori Mentor app for iOS and Android, which gives lots of examples and code snippets how to implement certain elements on the UI. And here you have also respective links to the mobile development kit. This is a bit similar to the Fiori Elements approach. With Mobile Development Kit, you're working on metadata, which generates your UI. So with SAP Mobile Development Kit, you can generate native iOS, native Android, or web based on metadata. Or you go the code-based way with the BTP SDK for iOS and Android. So let's go back to our overview. Where are we? We've covered the blue box. Let's have a look at the local development environments for non-ABAP and for ABAP. So let's have a quick look. We do have Visual Studio Code for the non-ABAP topics. And how does that compare to what we've just seen in the demo to Business Application Studio? Well, Business Application Studio runs on BTP in the cloud. You've seen Tim's demo. So this was purely in the browser. He just clicked on one of his bookmarks and the managed Business Application Studio launched. Because it's cloud-based, the coding is stored in the dev space in cloud, centrally administered in the SAP Business Technology Platform. Whereas if you have use cases where you want to work locally on your local laptop and have do this for example, in an offline scenario, or you want to have full control of your development environment, for example, Visual Studio Code, then most of the tools are also available, for example, the Fiori tools available also in Visual Studio Code. And that's easy to do because Business Application Studio is based on Code OSS, so they both have the same basis, and you can, for example, add extensions, add tooling for one to the other. They have the same basis. But these are the two approaches. Obviously, using Business Application Studio on BTP is the managed solution. Everything is provided out of the box, and you have the full integration into BTP and all SAP systems. That was non-ABAP. This one is about ABAP. So what was classically in the SE80 transaction is in Eclipse, the ABAP development tools, ADT in Eclipse, which provides a modern tool set for all things related to the ABAP language and things like data dictionary and so on, and test tooling and debugging and everything. This is the environment to do ABAP development nowadays. And Marvin provides 2 tutorials to set up Fiori tools in Visual Studio Code. So you have, let me quickly have a look at that. This is the ADT here I have. So that's the tutorial to install the ABAP development tools. So you see the prerequisites, and what you do is you download Eclipse, and once you have your Eclipse locally, you install the ABAP development tools. And in a similar fashion, you would work with Visual Studio Code. So follow this tutorial here to install Visual Studio Code and then add Fiori tools with the capabilities to develop Fiori applications, Freestyle UI5, or Fiori elements. So this is if you prefer a local development environment. So back to our overview. Where are we? If we are not creating a full custom app, but rather want to use a standard SAP app, maybe that doesn't fit 100%, but most of it fits. We want to reuse that and just do a little changes, little extensions to it. What options are there? We have 2 options depending on the technology of the respective application, and we're going to look at that. So first, we would need to see which standard apps are there. So for SAP Fiori apps, we have the SAP Fiori apps reference library, which is linked on this slide. This is basically a list of all Fiori apps. And it's many Fiori apps, obviously, for all the business scenarios, all the different SAP solutions. And you have lots of information for that about the app itself and its features, but also about technical features, how to implement the different versions and so on. And here on this slide, I highlighted 2 things because I think at SAP we are good in providing great functionality, but sometimes it's sort of hidden somewhere. So you see this little filter button at the bottom here. So you can filter the list of Fiori applications according to the SAP solutions you have to the respective versions, and then you get the Fiori applications you actually have access to. And another highlight here, I think, is in the section here of implementation information. It also gives you information on how to extend applications, right? So for a specific application like this one, this cash flow analyzer here, you would get a documentation on the data structures, for example, in the gateway service, the backend, which data dictionary structure is there? What's the name of the custom include in that dictionary structure where you can put in custom fields, for example. So there's a lot of good documentation and information. It's just a bit hidden, and this is why I highlighted this here. So if we found a standard application and we want to extend that, adapt that, If the application is an DynPro screen, a Web DynPro ABAP screen, then we have the SAP Screen Personas tool. So the Screen Personas tool, with that you can hide fields. Remember at the beginning I was saying how complex some SAP transactions are. So with that tool you can keep the standard application and sort of on top put a flavor, could put a layer where you, for example, simplify the screen by removing some tabs, for example, or rearrange some elements. Or you can pre-fill fields with values and certain ways to automate some flows. So this is really to simplify that, also the screens with the classic technologies. By the way, also for mobile devices here. This is for the classic UI technologies. And then for UI5 technologies, we have an offering called UI5 Flexibility. Again, the scenario is probably familiar to you. You want to extend or adapt a standard application in an efficient way. You don't want to modify the standard of SAP, because then you have trouble. You have to do, if the SAP provides the next version, you need to check whether there's a conflict, like the spout transaction in ABAP. And you also don't want to copy the standard application, because then you're completely disconnected. But what you want is to have a clever way to add your custom extensions nicely separated from the standard. And they should work with each other, even if SAP provides a new version. And what is new with SAP UI5 Flexibility, that there's no extension points needed anymore. So in the past, for example, if you have an ABAP background, you know there's bodies in ABAP. And if an application developer has put in a body, you can add your extension code. But if there's no body, no extension points in UI5, we also have extension points and controller hooks. If the application developer has not put in these predefined extension points, then you were not able to extend. And we often got the feedback that these extension points are not sufficient, not in the right place, not enough. So with UI5 Flexibility, they are not needed anymore. You can extend applications just because they use UI5. Little prerequisites are necessary here, but there's no need for predefined extension points. So who would do such extensions here? You see three personas. One is the end user. The end user could do also some changes to a standard app in the sense of personalization, just hiding a field which is not relevant, for example, just for him or herself. On the other hand, there's the developer. If there's more serious extensions required, then a developer could go into code, for example, in Business Application Studio, and add code-based extensions to the standard application. Or the key user here in the middle. The key user is someone who has a certain technical understanding, but is not working in code. So imagine the key user knows how the end users work. The key users want to take a standard SAP application and adapt that, tailor that to how the end users work. And I just want to show you how that would look like. How would the key user work? So you can do that as well. It's easy. There's a demo app. So where you start is the UI5 demo kit. So this is ui5.sap.com. So that's a link also provided in the slides, ui5.sap.com. And let me make the font size a bit bigger. And there's a section here on demo apps. And if you scroll down, we have SAP UI5 Flexibility demo apps. There's one Freestyle UI5 and one with Fiori elements. So let me just pick the Freestyle one here, key user adaptation. Now this is a standard application coming up. This is about managing products. It shows a list of products and some details. Now imagine I'm a key user. I have a specific authorization making me a key user. I know how the end users work. I want to tailor this standard app for my end users. If I have this authorization, I see this menu entry here, Adapt UI. So I pick that, and you see that in the UI, I can make changes. My mouse pointer is changing. And for example, if I know my end users, they need the description, this is the most important field for them, I can move this to the top. Just using drag and drop, moving this to the top. I also know that my end users, they use a different terminology. They don't call it description. They call it, I don't know, text, something. This is the language they understand. And I also know the rating is not relevant for them. They don't need that. I can remove this field to make the screen simple and more easy for them to use. So these were a couple of changes. I can also add more fields. So all the fields which are provided by the backend service in this case, let's assume, I don't know, we want to add the currency here. And here it is on the screen. So I'm doing all these changes without touching code, right? I don't have to launch an IT project to do a code-based extension. There's a number of changes more than I just showed I can do without touching code. And I can provide these changes to the end users. And there's different ways. One of the latest functionality is that I can provide these changes also on a role base, right? Not to all end users, but based on a role. So users in the sales role can see this change, and users in the service role would get another change. So I think this is a very strong concept, but of course we also have the developers creating adaptation projects. That's what we call the projects holding the extensions created by developers. Developers would work in a business application studio, create code-based adaptations for standard SAP applications. So just if we zoom out a bit, what would be the flow for the whole story here? So if you start with a business requirement and you're looking at the Fiori user experience, and you start from the top left, the first thing is you would check if SAP offers a standard Fiori application. If yes, can you use that out of the box? Then you're good. If the app needs some changes, you might want to use the key user adaptation I just showed you, right? This is this box here I just showed you. If there's more serious adaptations needed, there's developer adaptation, also using UI5 flexibility, but then code-based happening in Business Application Studio. So this is on SAP UI5 apps. If that's not available, but you're looking at classic transactions, classic UI technologies, again, you can check whether the application needs changes, and if not, use it right away. And if changes are needed, then also a key user, business expert type of person could do changes using the screen personas tool we were just talking about. And if, if that is also not available, then check whether you have a tight integration into S/4HANA. Then an extension on the S/4HANA cloud stack, for example, in the ABAP environment might be the right choice. And if not, then it could be more a side-by-side extension, right? An application running on BTP on the cloud, built with UI5, either with the Fiori Elements approach or with the Freestyle approach, as we have discussed earlier, then being a separate application running on BTP and connecting, for example, to S4 data or any other system. So this highlights some of the aspects when checking for a standard app, when doing extensions, and where to do those extensions. Very good. So again, a couple of links, also the link to the UI5 demo kit here to see and to play around with the demo apps. And now this is the last section here, this is the entry page for mobile. At the very beginning, we had the question on the mobile start. So let's have a quick look at that. This is the native entry point. And you see that this is not, it's a native entry point, right? It's not like the Fiori client running in a browser with certain limitations, but this is natively integrated into the respective operating systems. So it's the start screen, it's to launch application, and it also, as you see on the top right, it is integrated into notifications, for example, or widgets, and so on. So let me just quickly see if I can show that to you. So you see here my mobile phone, right, with the SAP Start application. And if I launch that, there's a number of applications here. There's new to-dos, for example, here a purchase requisition at the top. And if can select that, by the way, this is native mobile applications. So this is a purchase requisition, and I have buttons here to approve or deny that. And the one thing I wanted to show, there's various functionalities and applications here, but the interesting thing I want to show here is that this is fully integrated into the iOS operating system. For example, with the widgets. If I look for the widgets from SAP Start, I can see that there's various widgets here available, and I can pick them to add to my screen, right? So this is really the native entry point. It can launch native apps, it can launch web applications, but in contrast to the Fiori client, it is really integrated into the native operating system. Very good. So just a summary again to look at everything we talked about today. So on the right, for the business user to launch applications, we have web and native. We have the various products, for example, SAP Start and Work Zone, if you're looking for a central entry point, but also there's home pages in the individual products. And we have mobile start as the native mobile entry point. We have in the yellow section in the middle, we have technologies to extend or adapt standard applications if the standard application fits more or less and you just need a couple of changes, maybe via drag and drop, maybe code-based. Or if that is not sufficient and you are about to develop a full custom app, then there's various tools. There's pro-code tools like SAP Build Code, as Tim showed. There's low-code, no-code tools as SAP Build Apps. There's tools for mobile development. There's local development environments for ABAP and for non-ABAP to develop your custom application. So this is my summary, and this is just contact information in case you want to contact us. I just want to repeat, don't panic. Try to use the entry points and tutorials Marvin provided in these slides. By the way, these slides and recordings will soon be available on the same pages where you registered. And I would say thank you, and we can just go into questions, right, Tanya?
Absolutely correct. We have some questions. Let us go back. Questions we didn't have time to answer in between. So, what's happening behind the scenes when you choose a visual component in Build Apps? System writes the code, right?
The system generates code. The applications of Build Apps are based on let me see. Yeah, are based on React Native, and it's creating coding behind the scenes, right? It's not the coding built code creates. So it's not SAP UI5, for example, or CAP, but it's code, and the Visual Cloud Functions creates the respective backend, for example. But in Build Apps, Build Apps is the solution for the citizen developer, for low code, no code. It's not code based, right? So it's not that you can also see the respective code.
Thank you. Then using Fiori Dev Space, we can create a front-end app using the standard OData services, right?
Yes, standard OData services are the basis for everything we talked about here. Yes, and the two options are SAP Build Apps for low code, no code, or SAP Build Code with Business Application Studio and the Dev Space for the pro code way. So Build Apps for low code, no code, Build Code for pro code. But both can consume an OData service from the backend to provide the business data. Yes.
Great, thank you. Now, is Joule also available in Business Application Studio for CAP and UI5 development?
Not yet. We are working on this. So the current plan is to provide that in Q1 next year. And again, the current plan is to provide Joule as part of the Build Code package or offering, as Tim explained. And then we're currently working on that. The teams are working heavily on the different scenarios and implementing that Joule can support developers, for example, creating UI5 code or CAP code. So there will be different scenarios, and Joule will help you coming in from the side and provide help in various scenarios. Not just the one Tim showed. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then a quick correction. With regards to Business Application Studio, it is part of Build Code, but it is also available as standalone.
Exactly, that is right. So the services you might be familiar with on BTP, for example, Business Application Studio, for example, Cloud Foundry Runtime, for example, CI/CD or other services you'll see in the cockpit on BTP. They continue to be available. They continue to be strategic. Please continue to use them. With Build Code, we added a package to more easily consume them. So you don't need to find them individually, have an individual commercial interaction with the services and decide which to use. You have one offering, Build Code, covering pro code design time, development, as well as the runtime in one offering. But the existing services will continue, and you can continue to use them individually.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Then, is there any tutorial specifically for adaptation projects?
There is not yet a tutorial on developers.sap.com like the others I linked. I do have a Word document with a tutorial which soon will be turned into one of the tutorials. So if you're interested in that Word document, you can just send me an email and we can figure that out. But soon we'll have one also on developers.sap.com.
Thank you very much. So, next question. Is there in the roadmap a solution for offline apps on Windows like you did with SAM?
Offline apps on Windows. I'm not sure. Let me be honest. I don't know. I understand this is a question on mobile, dedicated mobile scenarios. So I would recommend the SAP community for mobile. There's a community topic page for mobile services and to check the information there or to ask the community. I don't know. Sorry. Or you can also send me an email and I can try to find out, of course.
Thank you very much for the offer. Are there guidelines for when to use side-by-side extensions versus in-app extensions for an S4 on-prem scenario?
There are some guidance specifically for S4, and the teams are currently working on a new guide for exactly that. So that will be published in the BTP guideline. There's a BTP guideline page, and that will show up there. It's not available there yet. So the guidance is obviously that if you have a close connection to the S4 system, for example, it would rather be an on-prem, not on-prem, an on-stack extension consuming the data of that system, whereas it has less connectivity. You don't need to call, like, read tables in S4HANA, for example, of the ABAP cloud programming model, or call individual APIs. But if it's more an own application calling an OData service, then the side-by-side approach would be the right. So there will be more guidance from SAP coming up on this topic.
Thank you very much. What is the positioning of SAP Fundamentals Library in the SAP UX environment? Will these libraries be developed further, or is the focus on SAP UI5 Web Components?
We will still have the Fundamentals Library. The Fundamentals Library is for styling. It's a CSS library providing the visual design. You might remember the layers I showed you on one of the slides. The bottom layer is about the styling, the CSS, and this is where Fundamentals Library helps. The recommended or the strategic reuse layer is the web components, which on top provides the UI components with some behavior as well. So not just the styling, but the components, where then you can benefit even more from the capabilities of that component. And there's variations of the UI5 Web Components for Angular and for React. But we'll also have the styling for that, for use cases where you just want to apply styling.
Thank you so much. Now, is the SAP UI5 code in JavaScript?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Whether SAP UI5 code is in JavaScript.
Yes, it is. And it's not just JavaScript, because we not so long ago also introduced TypeScript. So on top of the pure JavaScript, you also have types, which makes it easier for the developer to develop applications. So you have better code completion, syntax check, and so on with TypeScript in addition to JavaScript. But yes, JavaScript knowledge, web development knowledge is required if you go for Freestyle UI5.
Okay, it seems we are done.
Maybe now that maybe I have one more chance, right? Because I saw something in the chat before. I don't know if that was addressed again. That BAS is only available via Build Code now. That's not right? So BAS is an important part of Build Code, like other services and technologies in there. But it's also available standalone, like all the other services in there. What's true, though, is what you've seen, the generative AI part, that's only available in Build Code. That's not available in standard BAS. And there was another question that asked, like, oh, is this also available for CAP? Yes, what you've seen was CAP, right? Everything that we generated with generative AI, that was CAP, right? It was first CDS models, so CDS as the basis of CAP, CDS model and the service, and application logic. It was CAP. It will in the future be extended to other technologies, including UI5 and Fiori elements. I think it's fair to say.
Right.
Great.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
So if there's no more question, just highlight, don't panic, check out the materials. Tanya will provide the recordings and the slides at the place where you registered for the session. Check out the materials, the tutorials, and if you do panic, then send me an email and we'll try to fix that.
Quick correction, there was no registration. The recording is simply the video where the people are on now. It's being transformed into a video right afterwards. And the presentation will be linked underneath in the description. Just give us a couple of days to do that. There's another question, Tim. Is there a tutorial explaining the backend service in CAP?
Oh, yes. For CAP, there is a lot of services, a lot of tutorials available. As such, you know, I think it's probably a good idea to go to our developer portals and have a look for these. I don't have one ready. There's also we can provide that probably in the slides afterwards. There's also one entry page for Build Code, where you from where you can get into the different tutorials. You might also be able to actually get into the tech ed workshops that these should all be available online. So there's a lot of material about CAP. I think the easiest way, actually, you know, from the top of my head, is actually also the CAP documentation, which is very hands-on, right? It's not like very abstract. It's very hands-on. If you just look for cloud application programming model and Google it, you will immediately get into the CAP documentation.
Maybe you can check. I just putting two things to the chat. One is the tutorial navigator for all developer tutorials, and the other one is the cap.cloud.sap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the one. And the tutorial navigator, exactly. That was the word that I was looking for. Thank you, Oliver, where you find a number of CAP tutorials.
Oliver, I cannot see it in the chat. Perhaps you can quickly give it to me in Teams, and I will provide it post it in the chat. Sometimes it's not possible for other people to post links apart for the administrator.
I'll put them in the Teams.
Yeah, I have it. Let me.
There's two links.
Okay. This is one. And let me get the other one.
I have the feeling that we covered all questions. Very good.
So yes, there are a big lot of thank yous in the chat. Let me quickly post in the last one. Here we go. Developer. Here. Page says not found. This
I think there's in the link has some other characters, but if you'll be able to figure that out. It's just what was pasted has too many characters.
Yeah. Exactly, because it was directly, I copied it out of Teams and it did it this way in a very strange way, but I think it should work. So then I think it's my time to say a big thank you to our experts, to Oliver and to Tim, for your awesome session. It was very entertaining. That's what our attendees mentioned as well. And of course, a big thank you to our attendees for joining. 2 hours is a long time, so awesome. Thank you very much for investing your time. I hope you got a lot of value from the session. And Oliver, right, we will do another one next year, another update of everything and how everything fits
That would be
together.
great. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining. We are going towards the holiday season. So have a great day, have a great evening, and a great holiday time.
Thank you. Bye. And don't panic.
Bye-bye, everyone.